we want to welcome everybody to the first in our study of Exodus. This is an overview and a time in which during the beginning of the new year, we may feel like days of hope and promise are ahead, but we also know that right now in this strange time, we're not all there at that day of hope and promise. And so this time between New Year's and the start of Lent is a great time to go on a journey with Moses and the Israelites. And we want to welcome you along with us on this journey. You can join us on Tuesdays live at 10:30, and we would love to have you with us. And we're glad that you can enjoy the recordings, but if you're free and can join us, come in person, and please see me about doing that. I want to go ahead and mention that on not next week, but the next week, the 19th, we will have a special guest. We will take a sidestep from our study of Exodus and have a special guest. Bishop Will Willimon will join us.
Really?
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's very cool.
He's got a new book called The Gospel for the Person Who Has Everything. It's a re-edition of a book he wrote 20, 30 years ago, and he's updated it for today. And so he's going to be our teacher and guide on the 19th in 2 weeks. So I'm very, very pleased about that. So that being said, let us get into Exodus. First of all, let's just throw out a few things. What do you think of when you think of Exodus? I bet I know.
Slavery and coming out of Egypt.
Slavery and coming out of Egypt.
Get out.
A long line of people walking.
A long line of people walking. Is that a Star Trek blanket?
Yes, it is.
Oh my goodness, man.
Nice.
John, what were you saying? John, what were you saying that makes you think of?
Get out.
Get out.
Yeah. Freedom.
Freedom. Yes, Linda.
It took a long time.
A long time.
A long time.
They're grumbling.
Grumbling, murmuring.
God being active.
God being active. And nobody mentioned Charlton Heston? Come on,
Is he
right?
really there?
He was. He had the hair and everything, and it was amazing. There's one scene. I need to find it and get a screen capture of it or something. But there's one scene where I'm told they made a blooper, and it's in one of the times when he raises his arms to keep the Red Sea parted. And in one shot, you can see a wristwatch on one of his arms. Yeah. So anyway, Exodus. Yeah, Exodus can kind of be divided up into two big groups. And you can write if you want. If you're a writer and you want to write this stuff down, that's fine, but you're not going to need it later. So, it's just an overview. I'm just going to give you an overview, which you guys really kind of did already. Chapters 1 through 15 are the story of the slaves exiting Egypt into freedom. Chapters 16 to 40 are about how the slaves exit estrangement and learn to live in community. So two things happen, there's the getting out of Egypt, and then there's this whole formation time that happens in there. Themes in Exodus. Number one theme, who God is. The I am. The revealing of God is I am the I am. The divine name, the lawgiver, the God who is incomprehensible, the God who is wrapped up in mystery and on the mountain and all this. Another theme, who Israel is. Who Israel is. They were a slave people, and then they become a free people, and then they have to figure out how to be their own people, their own selves, who God has called them to be, no longer serving Pharaoh. And they have to go through a transformation in their own mentalities about who God is and who they are, and have to understand that in a new way. Another theme is wilderness.
Mhm.
One thing we find, and that something we come back to sometimes, is wandering in the wilderness. And sometimes you may feel like you really wander in the wilderness, and that's something that we're gonna see. And another one is the last one. The last one I would mention, at least at this point, is the theme of tabernacle. The idea that God is going to dwell with them. That's going to come in those later chapters, when God will instruct the people how to build a dwelling place for God. And the whole idea that God is going to dwell with the people. I mean, that's mind-blowing to them, and to us too. That's going to be a major theme. So we're gonna visit all these different things in various ways, but just sort of, plant those seeds and just let those things percolate in your mind there, as we encounter this text. Well, we're ready to read, and I've asked, since we have some longer passages, and I want to kind of get your help here. I've asked Marlene to read today chapters 1 and 2. And Marlene, first we're going to read chapter 1 and talk about it, and then we'll read chapter 2 and talk about it. So if you will read us chapter 1, we will read along with you.
Okay, thank you. And I'm in an NIV version. Okay.
Okay.
These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household: Reuben, Simon, Levi, and Judah; Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin; Dan and Naphtali; Gad and Asher. All of the offspring of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. But the descendants of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, "Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and if war befall us, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore, they set taskmakers over them to afflict them with heavy burdens, and they built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they made the people of Israel serve with rigor, and made their lives bitter and hard service in mortar and brick, and in all kinds of work in the field. In all their work they made them serve with rigor. Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Sippah and the other Puah, "When you serve as midwives to Hebrew women, and see them upon the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live." But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this, and let the male children live?" The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and are delivered before the midwife comes to them." So God dealt with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live.
Thanks, Marlene. Beautiful,
Yeah.
helpful. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Anybody kind of remember or can say kind of how they ended up in Egypt in the first place? I found the part in Genesis 46 when it says at the beginning of Genesis 46 that Israel set out on his journey with all he had and came to Beersheba, offered sacrifices to God and Father Isaac. God spoke to Israel in visions in the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here am I. Then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again, and Joseph's own hand shall close your eyes. Then Jacob set out from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried their father Jacob, their little ones, and their wives in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry them. They also took their livestock and the goods that they had acquired in the land of Canaan, and they came into Egypt. Jacob and all his offspring with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters, and all his offspring he brought with him into Egypt. And that's how they got there. You know, they started in a peaceful way. Egypt sent some help to go bring them up, and so things were managing to go along in that area. And Joseph, of course, becomes so very important to Pharaoh. And then the first thing we have in the reading we just heard is that Joseph died, which happens at the end of Genesis 2.
Mm-hmm.
And all his brothers in that whole generation. So a whole generation passes and a new generation comes along. And the Israelites are being fruitful and multiplying. Now, isn't that what God told them to do?
Yes.
Back in the Old Testament?
That's right.
They were being blessed.
Correct.
But then the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied. But then verse 8, a new king arose over Egypt, a new Pharaoh who did not know Joseph. This and then sees the Israelites as a threat. And I want us to think about that for a moment, that there's a population that is the population of a nation that understands its own identity and then begins to react out of fear because another population is living in their land and growing in number. And there's inescapable modern day parallels here in America. And this idea that that people who are different, that they are, the more numerous they become, the more of a threat they are. And that's a mentality that Pharaoh went to. And I think it's a warning to us to avoid that mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And to be very careful about that. This becomes an adversarial relationship between Israel and Egypt, and we see at the beginning right away that now it's gonna be so adversarial and so such a fight that Pharaoh commands that the Hebrew boys be killed, right? That he brings in the midwives and says, if it is a boy, kill him. Can you imagine a midwife killing the baby they had just helped deliver?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the bottom, lowest level of sadistic
Yeah.
fear and awfulness. Um this this shaping of this and this telling of this story, though, helps the Israelites look back and think about how they were different from the Egyptians. They didn't live this way, and it was to be a way that will help them later on look back and say, look, we weren't like the Egyptians. And later on, God's going to tell them, look, don't be like the Egyptians. Remember what the Egyptians did, how they were. Bless you. So this is a new way. These, what did you think of how these two midwives escape the powerful command of Pharaoh, or subvert? What did you think about that? Anybody?
I thought it was a miracle, and God was certainly doing this.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm surprised Pharaoh didn't have their heads.
Right.
This was wild. I mean, these said he is going to have these. They said, "Oh, these Hebrew women are so powerful." And here again, the women were resisting, not only the midwives but the mothers. And I'm pretty sure that Shiphrah and Puah were in on this plan. You know, and or at least this is what they said happened, because already there's this tale of resistance. It's the resistance of the small, scrappy, although they're growing in number, but they're still scrappy. The Hebrew people, the Israelites, in fact, even calling them Hebrews here, as they will begin to happen. You know, at first he says the Israelite people are more numerous, but then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, and Hebrew is now, I may be wrong about this, but I don't think it's ostensibly a derogatory term, but it's more of an ethnic term. I don't know how the best way to put that. More of instead of calling them by the name of the forefather that from whom they descended, it's more of it's more of like, it's kind of has an implication of those people, like those people who are not like us. And it's the Hebrews were a wider group of people moving about in the area too. So there's already a change in the naming. Hebrew, yeah.
I was just thinking, biologically, it would have made more sense to kill the female babies. Because he's killing off his future builders.
Yeah.
And a girl can only have one baby, where a boy can have multiple babies.
Yeah. I don't know. I can
just
only imagine.
I
can only imagine it's a power thing. It's that.
Yeah, I think it's a power thing.
Yeah, because the men are going to be in the army, or they're going to be in something like that in this time. I think it is. But Hebrew was sort of a floating mass of unacknowledged, unnamed humanity, kind of a nobody kind of a term. And so already we're getting this political, ethical conflict, this class conflict, and this idea of the haves and the have-nots. And we're going to see how that whole oppression is going to get even worse later on, when they are told, when it is like their work is made harder for them. But before we get there, we're going to meet Moses. And that's what chapter 2 is about. Chapter 2 begins to bring about, raise up this Moses as a part of the narrative. So any other reflections, we can always come back to chapter 1. And the thing about Exodus is everything's going to build on everything you already heard. So you're always going to come back to chapter 1 one way or another. But Linda, what are you thinking while we're in chapter 1? What did you?
Well, we just heard the scripture about Herod ordering the death of all the baby boys.
Yes.
The New Testament. So there is certainly a much parallel here, and very likely that at the time that the baby boys were ordered to be killed, they must have remembered this scripture. So
yes.
memory there. This has happened before. Someone came forward. Someone was saved.
Right.
And will be the leader. So it's just it's interesting how scripture repeats itself. We have different characters, but the scenarios repeat themselves.
And another one's going to be the Passover, that becomes the Passover, the angel of death passing over the homes. Yeah. So we get this set up that this is the oppressive power and the resistance people. Okay, Marlene, I think we're ready. Ready to read us chapter 2?
Here we go.
Okay, here we go.
Now a man from the house of Levi went and took to wife a daughter of Levi. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a godly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and dabbed it with bitumen and pitch, tar, I think. And she put the child in it and placed it among the reeds at the riverbank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid to fetch it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and lo, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse for the Hebrew women to nurse a child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take the child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses, for she said, "Because I drew him out of the water." One day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man that did the wrong, "Why do you strike your fellow?" He answered, "Who made you a prince and judge over this? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "Surely the thing is known." When Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the trough to water their father's flock. The shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flocks. When they came to their father Reuel, he said, "How is it that you have come so soon today?" They said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of shepherds, and even drew water for us and watered the flock." He said to his daughters, "And where is he?" Why have you left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter, Zipporah. She bore a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. In the course of those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned under their bondage and cried out for help. And their cry under bondage came up to God, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God saw the people of Israel, and God knew their condition.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Again, thank you, Marlene. Three sort of parts here. The birth of Moses, young Moses, Moses fleeing to Midian. And I'm actually going to say that verses 23 through 25 are a separate part that where a new thing begins to happen. But let's back up and look at how we are introduced to Moses. He's a Levite boy, born of the house of Levi, a Levite woman. So he's already gets his priestly class, his priestly tribe credentials, and he's hidden for 3 months, and then set in the Nile. You know, it had been said, right, that Pharaoh commanded that every boy shall be thrown into the Nile in the last verse we saw. So there was an all-out hunt for Hebrew boys because the whole midwife thing didn't work. So he is set out adrift. And can you even wrap your mind? Can you even think about Moses's mother and what she was going through in doing this? And just to imagine setting your child off, you know, in hopes that it's kind of like leaving a baby at the doorstep of the hospital or something like that, right? Or the orphanage or whatever, because you're doing it to try to save his life. And then he's picked up by his sister, watches from a distance, sees him get picked up by Pharaoh's daughter, who takes pity on him. And then sister doesn't ever reveal who she is to Pharaoh's daughter, and works out for mother to come nurse the child, and it's never exposed that this is really the child's real mother. And so just, I mean, think about it.
It's a miracle in itself.
Oh my goodness. And just think about the mother having let go of her child, now returning to nurse and help care for her child in right under Pharaoh's nose. Yeah, Lee, what are you thinking, bud?
I was just thinking that's pretty slick on that sister's part. I mean, she's a fast thinking girl. And that's not the kind of thing that the mother or the daughter the sister can figure out ahead of time, that the princess is going to walk down to the Nile and find a baby. You know, that just happens on the fly. So
wow,
somebody's helping out somewhere.
Wow,
Yeah.
right.
I think there's an intervention.
Yeah. Thank
Divine.
You.
There is, we don't always get this, but there's a lot of Hebrew humor in this story.
Subversive humor, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah. What we've got here is this is going to be Israel's leader.
Yeah.
Okay. And almost always when you have a leader, there's a tremendous story tied into the birth in the ancient world. Almost always. And but you know, here you've got not only is the child now going to be raised in Egypt's Pharaoh's house?
Yeah.
But Pharaoh's gonna pay for it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Right.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to almost say, see how stupid he was.
Yeah.
And we get that a whole lot
Mm-hmm.
in Hebrew humor. You're going to find it over and over again in the Old Testament, and it was told to be. Remember, this story would have started off in oral tradition.
Yeah.
It would have been told to get good laughs out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we take all this stuff so seriously and so factually that we miss the humanity of the story.
Right.
We want it to be so surreal
Mm-hmm.
and divine
Mm-hmm.
that we skip
Mm-hmm.
that God uses humanity.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be necessarily a miracle here. In fact, I think the child was placed right in the right place. The princesses come down to bathe at a given time.
It wasn't supernatural, but it was divinely choreographed, right? Yeah.
So yeah, but don't miss the humor. This is supposed to show how stupid this particular Pharaoh was, that he's going to actually set up his own thing.
Right. Yeah, Linda.
I think it's also a testament to how influential the Pharaoh's daughter must have been. Which adds some humanity to him, I think. He obviously favored her immensely to say, okay, it's like, you can do this. Sure, it's okay. I mean, like you said, it's underneath his nose. What she wanted, she got.
Yeah.
So she used her influence, with her father to be able
to. She got an exception to the rule, didn't she?
Well, yeah. So
you didn't have to kill her.
Another woman interfering, and using power to accomplish something pretty impressive.
Yeah, she and the daughter and the mother, are unwitting allies, if you will. Well, at least the Pharaoh's daughter is unwitting and not realizing what's going on. And here they go. Yeah, Joan.
I just have a question because I guess I just noticed this.
Yeah.
It says, Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter and took him as her son. So did the child not grow up with Pharaoh's daughter? The child grew up with his real mother, and then when he was an adult, he was taken to Pharaoh's daughter.
And I think he became adopted by Pharaoh's daughter, ostensibly.
It says when the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter and took him as her son.
Yeah.
So during his growing up years, where was he?
I think he was in the palace or in the care of Pharaoh's daughter. But Pharaoh's daughter the nursing was not just breastfeeding. The nursing was nannying and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
In the King James version, which I had, it says the child grew.
Yeah.
And she brought, so he could have been, he not necessarily grew up to be an adult.
No.
At what point, maybe when he was weaned or whatever.
Yeah. Or maybe like at some age of accountability or some kind.
Right. But I'm wondering, going back to what we said about Pharaoh's daughter and Moses' sister, you wonder if Moses' mother, they observed that, obviously the Pharaoh's daughter probably would have bathed in the same area or some, an area of the Nile
Yeah.
close to where she was. And if this wasn't sort of a premeditated attempt to save Moses, he obviously was going to be killed if they found him.
Yeah.
But if the Pharaoh's daughter found him and had
Yeah.
mercy,
She,
this would have been a way to save him. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, and then of course, the sister was watching, and you wonder if could have been a premeditated
well,
attempt to save him.
one might say, if not premeditated by the people, premeditated by God.
Right.
You know, and yeah, Fran, what are you thinking?
We were talking about him growing up. Wasn't 12 the age of when a boy turned into a man?
Mm-hmm.
Well, for the Hebrew people, and I'm not sure if that was solidified in the law yet. We don't have
or not, but
yeah, we don't have the law yet, but
yeah, a boy becomes a man at the age of 12.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's might be something that developed later, but
yeah,
but not necessarily. Could be.
But somehow he knew who he was.
He did. He did.
If he was an infant and put in the care of the Pharaoh's daughter, he would have grown up as her son.
Well, that leads us right into
Was of a different.
He knows that he's different. Yeah, he knows that it wasn't kept from him. He wasn't told that he was Pharaoh's son biologically, because that takes us right into the next section, because it says after he had grown up, he went out and saw his people. So he knew, and he saw their forced labor. He had a moment of reckoning and dawning on him that his people, even though here he was in the palace, they were being treated like this. So he sees the injustice, and it's even distilled into this one fight between where he kills this one Egyptian. That's part of the tale, but it's also representative of the larger problem that all of the Egyptians were beating and mistreating and etc., all of the Israelites. And what would happen if they rose up? And here he rises up violently. And Moses sees this forced labor, but he sees forced labor. And again, I don't want us to miss, I guess, the socio-economic, political undercurrents. They're not even undercurrents, they're right there, of what's going on here. This, we had slavery on the very grounds we walk on, and here in this land. And so when one group that's lording power over another group, this is a time where we're seeing oppressed labor for the imperial government. We're seeing people being used to build up not just the slave owners, but the whole system, the economy, the way of life, the ordered society. Moses, the Egyptians didn't see that way. They, or Pharaoh at least, didn't have any sympathy for what he was doing to the Hebrew people. But Moses has this moment of reckoning. He hides the body. He thinks no one sees it. But of course, then he goes to break up another fight between Hebrews, and they said, "What are you going to do? Kill us too, and hide us?" So now he's on the lam, because is he afraid of the Hebrew people? Maybe not that much. He's afraid of if Pharaoh finds out that he killed an Egyptian.
Yes.
Yeah. Jim,
That's bad
what are you
news.
thinking?
This is a different kind of slavery than we had in the United States.
Granted, yes.
Because the slavery we had here was individuals owning individuals.
Yes.
There's no sign in this story or in any other, or in their telling, where this was individuals who owned individuals.
Right.
This is a
Systematic.
a group in the in their economy and their situation that was of the lower working class.
Yeah.
And we see that in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah.
You got the untouchables in India today.
It doesn't have to. There doesn't have to be a slave owner for you to see this debate. Right.
Right. So
Good point.
We now I think it's great and that Black Americans grabbed onto this story and saw their parallels in the slavery.
But there's other parallels too. Yeah. Like apartheid.
Well, or like we still have in this country of classes of people.
Right.
We look at everybody that's Latino and we just kind of all lump them together and say Mexicans. And who's going to be doing the work on your roof? That's those are the types of things that where some parallels really are.
Yeah.
It's not just in our past.
No, quite right. Yeah, Lee.
While we're talking about this, maybe talk about what is the relationship of the better word, middle class of the Egyptian society. We talk about relationship with the Israelites and Egypt, but what about Egypt's
middle class?
They have the elite and Pharaoh and so forth. And all of his folks who run around with him. We have the same thing in our own society right now. But what we don't know I don't know anything about what the middle class and the lower class, the poor people of Egypt look like and the relationships.
I'm not sure either, Lee, but I know that middle class is not something that all cultures have had, and it's relatively recent in the grand scheme of things to even think about middle class. Ever since maybe the French Revolution, I mean, there's been this more of this emphasis on establishing a middle class.
Did Egyptians own Egyptians? To going back to what Jim was talking about a little bit.
There's nothing said here about it that way. It's said it looks like it's enforced by the military and by Pharaoh's either henchmen, military / powerful. But it doesn't tell us everything about that. But good question.
In early years, most of the people that were the slaves were conquered people, or people that had come into Egypt in this case that were not citizens. If you were a citizen of Egypt, you had certain rights that the Hebrews would not have had, and I don't know all that they are, but that the fact that you are a citizen and recognized citizen of Egypt would have put a distance or demarcation line between you and those Hebrews at all times. And so you would have, Moses, when he was afraid, was probably justifiably so in many ways, because but he had crossed that line.
He had crossed the line.
Yeah.
He had risen up against the oppression of the Hebrew people, which, that was going to meet nothing but ire from Pharaoh. So
Plus, it established him as a Hebrew.
It did. It was the beginning of his, his first taste of resistance. Now, what does he do when he gets his first taste of resistance? Does he fight or flight? He flights.
Right.
He flights, and he goes to he goes to Midian. This is an area that is kind of cast as a pastoral area, be out beyond the power dynamics and the I don't, geographically, I don't know, but exactly where, but symbolically and story wise, this is the non-Egypt. This is a place where people treat each other fairly and help it, well, with the exception of these shepherds who come up. The daughter, Jethro is surprised that his daughters came back so quick, which probably implies that they were not able to get up and get their flock watered as easily as those big burly shepherds or whoever else was coming around there. So there's already, even in those areas, some distinctions going on. There's some first haves and have nots, but they said this Egyptian helped us. Now notice they call him an Egyptian.
That's right.
They don't know him. I don't know. Maybe he's still wearing his prince attire or something like that. But he's brought in and he's invited to break bread, and he even finds love there, and or at least is married into the family. So Jethro becomes his father-in-law, and Moses is now married to Zipporah. And they have a son named Gershom.
His name was Ruel, and he had two names.
Yeah.
He had two names, Ruel.
Oh,
Yeah.
has the name Ruel. Yeah. This flight to this area changes the scene of the story, and now the story is an interplay between Egypt and Midian in a way. The story is it used to be like this in Egypt, but over here in Midian, this is how we treat one another. And there's hospitality, there's help. Moses helps these young women. It's the main point about Midian is that it's non-Egypt, non-imperial, non-stratified in the same sense of the way Egypt is.
And Moses finds what he's going to do in life. He becomes a shepherd.
He does. And very soon next week he will have his burning bush experience.
Yeah, he'll shepherd for the rest of his life.
Yeah. Now, meanwhile, the Pharaoh that was over there dies. Verse 23. Okay. And then the Israelites groan under their slavery. Remember what I read to you back at the beginning about Genesis and how God was going with them? And there's this sense that God has gone with them. Things fell into disrepair, to say the least. And now they groan under the cry of slavery. They cry out. Their cry rises up to God. God hears their groaning and remembers the covenant. And God looks upon them and took notice of them. That may seem like maybe, I don't know if that strikes you as God had been pretty distant or something. It's difficult for us where we've gotten so used to, Jesus is walking by my side and, and he's with God's watching me every day to read, well, they groaned and God took notice and said, oh yeah, I had a covenant with those people, but this is a transition point between God and the people. Remember, one of the things I said, the main points is this is about who God is. And we've not yet heard God reveal the divine name. So this is a narrative of liberation that begins, but the action of these will happen when the king dies. And when an oppressive ruler dies, everything becomes unglued back in the empire. and there's an opportunity to reconfigure. So we will see, excuse me, we will see what that will be.
That becomes a burning question.
A burning bush question. I'll read a little note here to wrap this part up. In the theology of this twofold movement, and what I'm talking about is verses 23 through 25. The crying out of the oppressed and God's hearing, the catalyst for divine deliverance is the outcry. Only now in the story does Israel find its voice. So only now does God enter into the story, at least in Exodus, right? From the beginning of the story until now, oppression continues unabated, but God doesn't appear to do anything about it. This is the world in which most of us are engaged in acts of peace and justice. Oppression continues unabated, and we sometimes wonder, where is God? In such a world, how can we make a dent or make a difference? The story of the women of Exodus tells us that in the face of Pharaoh, we can still save one baby. We can do what we have the power and ability to do. But we must also discover ways now for the oppressed to find their voice and cry out in pain and outrage. Together, these may not make a bit of difference to the pharaohs of the world, but the story tells us that these seemingly insignificant acts are the beginnings of salvation. So rather than getting hung up a little bit on, where was God, the idea is to now begin to see this is the transformative point. This is the point at which God hears, and next will follow the burning bush, of course, and we'll take that up next time. Thoughts or final thoughts, final reflections, ideas? Makes you want to watch the movie again? No, I don't know. Joan?
I was just going to say, this is just an aside. I was reading some of these footnotes here, but in the verse where it talked about the king died, of course, somebody took his place, and that the one who took his place, we think, was Ramses II, who was the most powerful pharaoh of that time.
Yeah, we think so. And
that was just interesting.
Yeah, it is. Well, it is, and he's about to go up against the baddest of the bad. I mean, you thought Pharaoh was bad. Pharaohs were bad already.
Yeah, right.
We ain't seen nothing yet.
Taylor.
Yeah, Lee.
Yeah, I'm thinking back on the movie. In the movie, and I know it's not.
Jim shaking his head. Jim, it's okay.
But Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner grew up together. Was Ramses II the Yul Brynner? Possibly.
Good point, right? Another movie goof. They don't change characters when the Pharaoh dies in the movie.
Well, what I was wondering is, if they grew up together in the palace, I can understand some of that animosity and so forth.
Well, maybe, did this new king, this new Pharaoh know Moses? That's an interesting question. I don't know. Huh. Good question. Well, hey, that will hang over us in mystery
I doubt that.
We see.
It won't hang long.
Very good.
Maybe not, but I actually think you're right.
Maybe, yeah.
With the way that the pharaohs did harems and the way that they did the child care within the palace, because pharaohs had multiple children with multiple wives.
Yeah.
And he was probably educated there in the palace, and now what we don't know is, if one of them was 10 years older than the other, or or if they were 10 weeks apart. That it would make a huge difference, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But they chances are, now notice my wording, chances are
Yeah.
they were aware of who each other
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
There's no way to be certain of that, even knowing. And thank God, Egyptians kept really great records,
Oh, yeah.
which ends up creating a little tiny bit of a problem for us with
Yeah.
the history here and the that we have in our Bible. And I know people don't like to say that there could possibly be a problem with the history, except it doesn't always jive with the recorded history we have from the Egyptians that miraculously enough has survived from that time to now.
Yeah. Yeah. They were good record keepers, but we're good. But the Hebrew people were good storytellers. So, all right. And let it be so. Let it be so. And it is blessing us. It blesses us today. So hopefully today from this time you have taken a good grasp of the story. You know, it's and you're beginning to encounter some of the very same things that are going to come up later on. The difference between the powerful and the powerless, the subversive resistance of the people, God now entering into the story. Make of that what you will. You know, this is how it was told that God heard, God got involved, and now that God gets involved, watch out, right? Watch out. So, and God is definitely going to take a side, and we are going to see that in a huge way. Well, this has been great. I think we'll wrap up, and I'm so delighted to have this time with you, and I hope. Next time, chapters 3 and 4. So, burning bush, divine name revealed, Moses' power, and Moses returns to Egypt. Okay, chapters 3 and 4. All right, let's close with prayer. Oh God, as we come from this story, we are reminded that it is still just as much a part of the story of who we are as Christians, because we are inheritors of the story of the God and inheritors of this of faith in you, oh God, who delivered the Israelites out of Egypt, who looked down upon your people and saw their travails and heard their cry. And God, as we have become exposed to the historical and modern day dynamics in this text, help us to go about with new eyes and new perspective, that we might be looking for you and thinking about you when we think about such things in the world around us. This we pray for Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Have a great one, everybody. See you
Thank you.
later. Bye. Enjoyed it. Take care. Happy New Year.